With this activating abundance episode, I want to dig into how worry really puts us in a place of lack and how you can change that to activate abundance by looking at possibility. And that's just one of many things that can help you reduce your worry. And this is kind of stimulated because this topic, because I talked about it a bit with Lorna Green on my last episode, but also I mentioned in my podcast newsletter about someone that I had run into at a neighborhood party who was really consumed with worry. And I felt so bad for her. And then I saw her kind of soften up and the tension go away once we were able to help her, another person and I who are in this conversation with her, kind of reduce her worry a little bit. So she was worried about deer ticks, and she just moved into the area where I live, and the place where she moved from didn't have deer ticks, and deer ticks are very prevalent, as are deer, which hence the deer ticks. But I have a story of having gotten Lyme disease, which is what happens when you get bit by a deer tick. And so I shared that with her because I caught it right away. I was really in tune with my body. I knew something was wrong, went to the doctor. I never saw a tick on my body. And when they came back and said I had Lyme disease, I was like, what? How is that possible? I never go in the woods. I walk my chihuahua on the sidewalk. So that it must have been, and deer ticks like cling onto grass blades. And so if you just walk in grass, or if the dog walks in the grass and they transfer to the dog, they can transfer to you. So probably that's where it came from. But I was stumped as to how I got it. And I got the medication. They have great meds that will kill it all. The problem is when you don't catch it and you ignore the symptoms, because you will get symptoms. And when you ignore the symptoms and they go and you have it for like a year untreated, and then it can move into, more, long-term effects. So, she's a master gardener, and I asked her about, are you excited about getting out in your garden in the spring? And that was what her response was, that she was too scared because of deer ticks. And so, that was something that I thought, a lot of people were worried. A lot of people, the pandemic has created this worry collective. And I have a mother-in-law who worries like constantly. And so I thought it would be helpful if you find yourself in a bit of worry. These tips might help you kind of flip that switch to one of abundance. We want to be activating abundance when we get into a state of worry. So first, I'm going to start with a couple definitions, and then I'll talk about some ways in which you can help yourself, because it's all under your control. So this is the worry definition, allow one's mind to dwell on difficulty or trouble. That's what worry is. Allowing one's mind to dwell. It's the dwelling on difficulty or troubles. Not that we can't briefly think about them, but the dwelling and the lingering and the focus, the constant focus, that's the problem. And then possibility, the definition of that is a thing that may be chosen or done out of several possible alternatives. And why I bring up possibility is because obviously, a negative possibility that can come into your mind. That's what is happening when you worry, is you're probably thinking about a possibility that likely won't happen, but it's a negative one. What I'm looking at is lots of possibilities and positive possibilities, because we always think the worst, right? That's where our mind goes. So think about the possibilities and start to be creative about them. So that's why I say you can activate abundance by really replacing worry with more possibility. Because usually when we worry, it's one thing we're worried about. It's like a real focus on this one alternative or not even an alternative, this one issue. This is what's going to happen, right? So possibility opens up the door to many. Okay. So one suggestion to get and reduce worry is to create a daily worry period. So I thought this was an interesting tactic. but you set a time for worry. So if something comes up, if you're a constant worrier and a new worry every day, or it's a worry that you keep having, but it comes up every day. So what you do is you say, okay, I'm not gonna worry about it now. My worry time is at 5 p.m. tonight. So you kind of park it, right? Not gonna think about it now, think about other things. So it's kind of a mental, you're really setting these rules and boundaries around when you can worry. So write down your worries. We all have the ability to do that very easily. And even when we're on the go, most of us have smartphones, and they're very smart, and you can even talk your worry into a voice notes app. You don't even have to write it down. You can type it in, or you can talk it in, and it will speech to text, right? So write down the worry and then just say, I'll think about it later, but that's it, right? That's it for now. And then when you get to your 5 p.m. worry time, your worry period, you go over your list of worries that you jotted down over the course of the day. So you removed worry from your day by writing them down and saving them for later. And then you pick up, 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever that might be. And if you finish earlier, then you're done. And that's it for the day. That's your worry period, and you're done. You might even want to get some worry beads or use an old necklace, right? So what this can do for you is it can help you when you review your worries, you're really kind of putting them under a lens, right? You're looking at them, you're examining them, and you might be thinking, wow, you start to become aware of maybe the ridiculousness or how consuming these are in your life. But examining them puts them up under a microscope, if you will, and you are become a lot of times worrying is so subconscious. It's just a bad habit we get into, and we often become numb to it. It's just this go-to mental state. It's a comfort zone in a sense. And so break that, start to really park it until a certain time of day, and document every time you think of a worry. So it is a great exercise. Then you go and look at your worries together, and then you're much more aware and much more, you're looking at it as a kind of an observer. This is all the things I worried about. Is this, is this worth it? Is this worth my time? It gives you a more balanced perspective of the things you're worrying about and why you're worrying about them. So, right? Okay. You want to challenge these thoughts. They're really producing anxiety, right? So challenge these anxious thoughts and ask yourself these questions about these thoughts, these anxious thoughts. What are the alternatives, aka possibilities? That would be kind of a fun exercise. So as you're going through your list, what are the alternatives? I'm just thinking this one thing is going to happen. What else could happen? What else could happen? And put a positive spin on it. Do your best. So if you're looking at kind of the worry of the pandemic, one of a positive spin of the pandemic is I spend more time with my husband. Maybe I'll get sick and die of COVID, but maybe I'll end up having a better relationship with my husband. Maybe I'll get to work from home, something I've always wanted to do. My son-in-law, in fact, he wasn't allowed to work from home. They had desktop computers, old fashioned, and his boss was real old school. And when the pandemic hit, they all got laptops, and he got to work at home with his wife and and this is a time when my daughter was pregnant and had a baby. So yeah, so look at the alternatives. So when you're challenging these anxious thoughts, these worried thoughts, ask if it's true. Now, is it true? Where is the evidence? Do you know this to be true? Do you know this is actually going to happen? What is the probability of this thing happening? That is an interesting question. Because if it's like 1%, then why the heck are you worrying about it? For me, yeah, I worried about COVID, and it's scary when something like that happens and it's happening all over the world and people are dying from it. But I also knew that I'm super healthy and I don't have any of the comorbidities that they talk about. And so it reduced my worry because I looked at the facts, right? And I also stayed at home, didn't expose myself to people. I reduced the risk. So, so what is the probability? All right. Is it helpful? Ask that. Is it helpful to have this thought and this anxious thought and this worry? So another question to ask yourself is, if a friend came to me with this worry, how would I help them? What would I tell them? How would I advise them in terms of how to deal with this worry? Because friends don't usually, buy into stuff. They usually try to put a positive spin on things for their friends. So be the friend that you need. And so think of it from that perspective. And then ask yourself, what are you gaining by having this worry? Because I see sometimes that people worry and are vocal about their worries to get some kind of gain. Maybe it's attention. So that's worth pondering. So those are really great questions. The other thing to think about with worry is that worrying is not solution-oriented behavior. In fact, worrying rarely leads to any kind of solution. I just get a visual of somebody wringing their hands. They're just sitting there worrying, wringing their hands. There's no action happening. So solutions involve problem solving, and problem solving usually involves some kind of action, right? So the question to ask, is it solvable? And if you can solve, if it's a worry that has a solution, as you've considered the alternatives, then become a problem solver instead of a worrier. Take action. So start brainstorming on, okay, if I'm worried about this, what can I do to prevent it from happening? And get into action mode, because that will interrupt your thought process and you'll get you focused on solving a problem instead of sitting there wringing your hands. If it's not solvable, then accept the uncertainty of it, because life is not predictable. We know that, right? Life is not predictable, and worrying will not make it that way. Worrying will not change the future. It will not. And how many people have you known that have survived, have had like a 10, there's something on Instagram, and if we're speaking of COVID, he got COVID, and he was given a very low percent chance of survival, and he survived. So if somebody spent so much time worrying about that, and that happened, that wasn't even predictable, even though there was a percentage and the probability was low. So we never know what the futures can bring, and the worries usually never come to fruition. We just invent them, and they don't go away, and we dwell on them, and then they don't happen. They stay in our head and steal our joy, is what it does. So when you focus on something in the future that hasn't happened yet, but you're worried it will, it just steals joy from the present moment. You're not living in the present, and we want to live in the present. You find the most joy in your present moment, in the present circumstances. And so release that worry, release it to the future that isn't here yet, because you have no control over that. And when you worry and you're vocal about it, it usually impacts other people. It brings other people down. It's a negative energy that so if you're thinking of being a selfless person, then recognize that. Recognize the impact that your worries would have on somebody else. Like I was talking about this woman at this neighborhood party, and the energy was draining to the conversation. I was kind of looking around for somebody else to talk to, but I wanted to help her and give her a different perspective to look from. And then when her worry meter dropped, she started smiling. Her shoulders kind of got less tense. There was so much visual release. And then she just generated more positive energy. And then the conversation turned and was a lot more enjoyable. And then I stopped looking around for somebody else to talk to. So that's what worry can do. It has a ripple effect, just like when you get lit up and you're excited about life and you're doing what you love, that's like a magnet, right? And the worry energy is like a repellent. So remember that. And the other tip is to find a way to interrupt the worry cycle. So stopping and saying to yourself, I'm not going to worry about this, and writing it down or talking it into your voice app, that kind of interrupts the cycle, because you're consciously saying, I'm going to think about something else, right? But something like exercise, stopping and doing some kind of exercise, because your mind can't really be two places at once, like with worry and then like listening to somebody instructing you in an exercise. Or meditate, and meditation is to like remove all thinking from your head and be in the present moment. So that's something you could do. Go find a great song on your playlist and sing to it and dance. And so that's another good thing. But just interrupt that cycle, that thought pattern that you're, is taking over and not doing any good. So those are my tips for reducing the worry, getting rid of the worry, which is bringing lack into your world, and turning to a more abundant mindset. And with abundance, and I think when I think possibilities is sitting down and brainstorming positive alternatives, puts you in an abundant place. So turn that worry into abundance, and try these tips if you're feeling really like worry has become a overwhelming presence in your life. And hopefully this will help. And I get it. I get the pandemic has done a number on all of us, but we have to get back to where we were and bring better energy to the universe and to the collective of the human race, because it's been through the ringer over the last couple of years. So I hope this has helped. And next week, I think is my last Activating Abundance episode. And then we're going to start a new series. So I'm looking forward to talking about that and doing some new stuff. All right. Talk to you later. Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraverage.grandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own Not Your Average life.